You know what I realized today? Amber said, arms crossed like she was delivering a TED Talk instead of talking to her husband. If I were a nanny, a chef, a personal shopper, and a housekeeper, I'd be making at least $1,500 a week. But since I'm married, I get nothing. I blinked. What? She didn't flinch. She'd clearly rehearsed this. I listened to this podcast about domestic unpaid labor, and it opened my eyes. I do everything around here. Look, grocery runs, cleaning, cooking, appointments, even organizing your dry cleaning. You wouldn't survive a week without me. Amber, we've always shared responsibilities. What are you talking about? No, she said flatly. We used to share things. Now I'm doing all the invisible work, and you just show up. I want $200 a week. Cash. Starting now. She didn't say it like a joke or a frustrated outburst. She said it like a bill collector, emotionless, businesslike. I let out a slow breath and leaned back into the couch. So you want a salary for being my wife? For doing your laundry? For remembering your mom's birthday? For scrubbing toilets? Yeah, exactly. There's a special kind of silence that falls when someone drops a bomb in your living room. The TV was still playing behind her, some sitcom laugh track bubbling like a ghost of a happier life. But in front of me was the woman I married, now drawing up invoices for our marriage. Funny thing is, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, okay. Amber blinked, surprised. Okay, sure. $200 a week. I nodded. You'll get it every Sunday. And I smiled, calm, agreeable, not an ounce of sarcasm. That's when she should have realized something was off. But she didn't. She thought she'd won. She turned and walked into the kitchen humming some pop tune. And I sat there staring at the photo on our mantle. Our wedding day. Before things got transactional. What would you do if your marriage turned into a paycheck? If love became labor? I had a plan now. Not to punish her, but to prove something she'd forgotten. Gratitude can't be bought. It has to be earned. And Amber was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Sunday morning, I handed her the first envelope. Your payment, I said, sliding it across the table with her avocado toast. Amber raised a brow, then peeked inside. 2 crisp $100 bills. You actually did it. You asked? I agreed. I said simply, I believe in fair compensation. She smirked. Well, didn't expect you to be so mature about it. Neither did she expect what I did next. That afternoon, I walked into the garage, cleared off the old workbench, and set up a file cabinet. I labeled each drawer, receipts, tasks, mileage, and mental labor logs. Every trip to the store, every appointment I booked, every time I refilled the propane tank or handled a school email for her nephew when she was too busy, documented. By Tuesday, I had color-coded spreadsheets. Every shared expense was logged. Household tasks were time-stamped. And my favorite drawer was titled Intangible Contributions. Emotional support, conflict resolution, last month's trip to visit her ailing aunt. That all went in there. Amber didn't notice at first. She was too busy enjoying her new income. By Friday, she'd posted a story on social media. Ladies, know your worth #paid-to-be-wife captioned under a selfie of her sipping matcha with the cash fanned out like poker chips. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But I did screenshot it and added it to a new folder, Gratitude Metrics. She didn't realize I'd taken over the grocery list. Oh, I got that already, I'd say when she reached for her keys. Didn't notice when I started using separate baskets at checkout, items for both of us, and items for just her. She definitely didn't notice when I started leaving receipts with little notes like purchased at 3:42 p.m. during personal lunch break, or gift, unbilled. This wasn't pettiness. This was precision. And it was working. Amber started getting comfortable. By the second Sunday, she accepted her weekly envelope like it was a direct deposit. She started skipping laundry days, saying, well, I'm off the clock. She joked that she should charge overtime when I asked her to hand me a dish towel during dinner. Each comment, each smug grin, went into the log. The strange thing is, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was watching, learning. And every time I logged another unreturned favor, another silent act of service, another unnoticed piece of labor I'd done with no expectation of reward, I felt lighter. She'd turned our marriage into a balance sheet. I was simply learning how to read it. But I'll admit, I was curious how far she'd take it. Because soon, we'd be heading on that 2-week cruise. Her idea, of course. She called it a celebration of partnership. And that irony, well, It was almost poetic. From the moment we stepped onto the cruise ship, Amber transformed. She wore her wide-brimmed straw hat like a crown and walked with the self-assuredness of someone who had nothing to prove, nothing to do, and nothing to thank anyone for. 2 weeks of zero responsibilities, she said, spinning on the deck like a carefree teenager. Exactly what I deserve. Deserve. That word rang in my head like a dinner bell every time she said it. The first night, she ordered lobster and champagne, snapping photos before each bite. I watched her laugh with the waiter, flirt, even toss in a, "My husband's paying. He's finally stepping up." I smiled, nodded, took a mental note. The next morning, she slept in while I was up handling excursion bookings at the service desk. She had no idea it required an hour in line. No clue I'd already tipped the concierge to get us upgraded balcony seating for the luau night. She just showed up in a sundress and accepted the fruit plate like royalty. "Thanks, babe," she said absently, eyes glued to her phone. "My followers love this view. You really outdid yourself." That was the only thank you I got the entire trip. By day 4, she was floating, literally and emotionally. At the pool, she lounged while I fetched sunscreen, towels, fruity drinks with extra umbrellas. If I sat down for more than 5 minutes, she'd snap her fingers playfully. "Look, can you go ask if they have watermelon slices? I'm craving some." And I went, not because she asked, but because I was still documenting. One evening, I overheard her talking to another couple. "I finally feel seen," she told them. "My husband used to be so robotic, but lately, he's been spoiling me like I always knew he could. I think he finally realized I'm not a free maid." The wife nodded sympathetically. The husband shot me a look, half pity, half warning. I just smiled and sipped my drink. I wasn't being spoiled. I was being studied. Every task she delegated, every luxury she accepted without acknowledgement, every subtle erasure of effort, I was logging it. Quietly, faithfully. A ledger of invisible labor, now made visible to one person. Me. By the second week, Amber had posted 12 vacation photos on Instagram. In every one, she looked radiant, independent, powerful. In none of them was I included. Her captions? Finally being treated right. Leveling up. Resting, not struggling. If someone had scrolled her feed, they'd assume she was single, maybe sponsored. Definitely pampered. But not once did she tag me. Not once did she say thank you. And that's when I understood something deep in my chest. This wasn't a partnership anymore. This was performance art. She was living out a fantasy. One where gratitude didn't exist because everything was owed to her by default. That night, on our private balcony with the ocean stretching forever, she looked out at the stars and said, "This is the happiest I've been in years." I nodded slowly. It feels good to treat someone when they truly appreciate it. She didn't turn toward me. She just hummed in agreement, like a cat purring in sunlight. And that silence, her contented, oblivious silence, was the most honest response I could have asked for. Because now I knew. She didn't see me as a husband. She saw me as a service. And services? They come with invoices. The ship docked early that morning, and by 9 a.m., we were back on solid ground. Amber stretched her arms like a woman waking from a blissful dream. "That was everything," she said as we loaded our bags into the trunk. "Exactly what I needed." I nodded, checking off the last item from my mental list. Carry luggage offboard. Another undocumented task. But I wasn't bitter. I was focused. Her satisfaction was the final item I needed before the reveal. The drive home took 4 hours. For most of it, Amber scrolled through her phone, earbuds in, smiling at messages I couldn't see and laughing at things I wasn't invited to understand. At one point, she turned to me and said, "So much engagement on my posts. I think that cruise really boosted my visibility." Visibility. That word felt strange coming from my wife. Not joy. Not closeness. Not gratitude for the man who carried the weight of 2 weeks' worth of logistics, bookings, time management, and quiet self-sacrifice. Just engagement. I didn't say much during the ride. I didn't have to. I was letting the silence do the work. As we crossed into our neighborhood, I casually said, "It felt nice treating someone well," when they actually appreciated. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Ma'am," she hummed. No curiosity. No pause. Just a vague, mechanical agreement. And that's when it clicked. Amber hadn't just stopped seeing me as her partner. She'd stopped seeing me altogether. We pulled into the driveway just before sunset. The house looked the same, but everything inside me had changed. I helped her carry her bags to the door. She walked in like a queen returning from war, immediately kicking off her sandals and sighing at the familiar feel of hardwood beneath her feet. "Home sweet home," she announced. I followed her inside, closed the door quietly, and placed the final envelope of vacation receipts into my office drawer. That evening, we didn't talk much. Amber was too busy uploading one last photo dump. I was too busy reviewing the spreadsheet one final time. 7 excursions. 4 formal dinners. 28 tasks performed on her behalf. Countless hours of logistical planning. And not one single word of thanks. The tension wasn't loud. It was surgical. Controlled. The kind that comes before a quiet storm. She didn't know what was coming, but I did. And it was time. Because in a world where she thought love could be tallied like an invoice, I prepared one she'd never forget. That evening, I called her into the home office. She walked in barefoot, sipping tea from her boss babe mug. Her vacation tan still glowed, and she wore that same satisfied smirk she'd been flaunting for days. "Something wrong?" she asked, sliding into the chair across from my desk. "No," I said calmly, sliding a folder toward her. "Just thought you'd want to review the numbers." She hesitated. "Numbers?" I nodded. "For the vacation." Amber chuckled. "Oh, are we budgeting now?" "Sort of," I said. "It's an invoice." The smirk faded. She opened the folder. Inside, perfectly formatted and itemized, was a document titled, "Invoice for Marital Services Rendered, Cruise Vacation Client, Mrs. Amber Riley Service Provider. Luke Riley Invoice number 001 due upon receipt." Underneath was a breakdown. Transportation to port and return, $300 cruise booking logistics, upgrades and research, $1,100 daily itinerary planning and time management, $850 dining arrangements, dietary requests, custom reservations, $720 photography/videography, content support uncredited, $480 emotional regulation under duress, $600 tipping, handling all staff interactions and concierge, $530 unpaid labor and partner care, unspecified errands, sunscreen fetches, etc., $1,000 mental labor, decisions, stress buffering, decision fatigue shielding, $1,200 total, $7,280. Amber stared at the paper like it had teeth. "You're joking," she said finally. "No. You invoiced me?" I nodded. "Based on your new framework, I thought transparency was appropriate." She blinked. "This is insane." "No, Amber. This is clarity." Her hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. "What exactly are you trying to prove? That partnership is invisible until it isn't. That what you've called being treated right is actually someone else picking up the slack without complaint. And that when you make love transactional, don't be surprised when the other party learns to itemize." Her voice dropped. "You've been planning this." "I've been documenting," I corrected, "since the day you put a price tag on our marriage." Silence. I watched her face shift, anger trying to rise, confusion not far behind, but mostly disbelief. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you realize you've walked confidently into a game you don't know the rules for. "I don't know who you've become," she said finally, her voice small. "No," I said, standing up. "You just stopped looking." I walked past her, left the invoice on the desk, and gently closed the office door behind me. No yelling. No fight. Just math. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the mirror in the hallway. 10 minutes after I left her in the office, Amber came storming out, waving the invoice like it was a subpoena. "Is this supposed to be funny?" she snapped. I didn't answer. I just turned off the stove and stepped away from the pan I was cooking in. She hated when I made things calm. It left her nowhere to throw her chaos. "You think this is witty? You think you're making some grand point here?" I folded my arms. "I think I made the point months ago. You just started listening." Her jaw clenched. "You've been waiting to ambush me. Like this was some setup." I stayed still. Let her spin. "You're calculating, Luke. This is emotional warfare. You're trying to make me feel like some villain for asking to be respected." "I did respect you," I said quietly, "even when you stopped returning the favor." She laughed, cold and sharp. "Oh, please. You're just bitter because I asked for something you didn't want to give. Because I challenged your little fantasy that being a husband doesn't mean doing your share." I pointed to the invoice still clutched in her hand. "You think that cruise ran on magic? You think the sunscreen, the reservations, the problem-solving just appeared?" "I didn't ask you to do all that," she shouted. "No. You expected it. She blinked, just once, but it said everything. Amber stared at me like she didn't recognize me. But this wasn't a new version of me. This was the original, just no longer edited for her comfort. She turned and grabbed her purse. I'm not staying here while you play martyr. You want to keep score? Fine. I'm out. Where are you going? My sister's. I nodded slowly. Take what you need. Her eyes narrowed. Don't pretend to be noble. You're loving this. No, I said, but I'm finally seeing it clearly. She packed fast, angry hands shoving dresses into a duffel, muttering insults under her breath. She didn't say goodbye, just rolled her suitcase to the door and left with a final slam that echoed through the now silent house. I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the door she'd walked out of. She thought she was making a power move, but what she didn't know was this wasn't the end of a fight. It was the start of something much quieter and far more permanent. It took her 8 days. 8 days of radio silence. 8 days of me making my own meals, folding my own laundry, watering the plants she always let die, and sleeping in a house that finally felt like mine again. And then, that 9th morning, there she was, standing on the front lawn in a sweatshirt that didn't fit and jeans that looked slept in. A single overnight bag at her feet. I opened the door but didn't step outside. Amber looked up at me with a face I hadn't seen in a long time. Bare, pale, uncertain. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't say yes, but I didn't close the door either. She took that as permission and slowly made her way to the porch. Her steps were smaller now, hesitant, like she wasn't sure the ground would welcome her back. I've been staying with Trish, she said, settling on the top step. Trish, her older sister. Recently divorced, living in a tiny second-floor apartment with flickering lights and a roommate she couldn't stand. She's not doing great, Amber added. We split a frozen pizza last night. She couldn't afford delivery. I said nothing, just watched her. Let her keep going. It's been eye-opening, she admitted. I thought I was walking into comfort, sympathy. But she's bitter, angry at everyone, even at me, after 2 nights. Why? I asked. Amber looked down. Because I complained. About you. About the invoice. About how cold you were being. And Trish just stared at me and said, Do you even hear yourself? She rubbed her hands together like she was trying to warm something that had gone cold. She said I was lucky. That if her ex had cared enough to document what he contributed instead of just leaving, maybe they wouldn't have split. Still, I stayed quiet. Amber looked up, and her eyes weren't sharp anymore. They were glassy. Honest. I get it now, she said. You weren't trying to punish me. You were holding up a mirror. And I hated what I saw. I could feel my chest tighten, but I didn't let it show. I was so caught up in feeling underappreciated, she continued, that I didn't realize I was doing the same thing to you. Worse, probably. Because you never asked for anything in return. You just did it. Quietly. Constantly. I leaned against the doorframe. So why come back? Because I'm not proud of who I became. And because I don't want to be the kind of woman who turns love into a transaction. I want to be your partner again, not your client. Her voice trembled. If you'll let me. For the first time since she sat down, I spoke. Do you understand why I had to do it? The invoice. She nodded slowly. You were showing me the value of what I'd ignored. And I'm sorry. Not just for ignoring it, but for expecting it. I stepped out onto the porch and sat beside her. She didn't reach for me. Didn't cry or beg. She just whispered, Welcome home feels a little different when you're not the one saying it. I looked at her. Then maybe it's time you learned how to say it. She nodded. Welcome back, Luke. And for the first time in weeks, I believed she meant it.